Dear students, today we'll be discussing about the bench which is prescribed for this BBA syllabus, BCA syllabus. We will first discuss its themes. The first theme is truth can't be hidden from those it impacts the most. Carly has lived his entire life not questioning the segregation of world around him. At a rally in Johannesburg, he suddenly introduced to the thought that perhaps the society is unjust. A speaker notes that your children are denied the rights which are theirs by birth. They are segregated educationally, socially, economically. These ideas seemed dangerous to Carly, and the scene in front of him of speakers interacting with each other as if no difference of color exists between them is confusing. How can this be? Yet, as he slowly processes their ideas, he realizes the truth of their words. This means that the world he has been always believing, one where God made the white man and the black man separately, and one must always be Bash and the other Jong, can't therefore be true. Bash means boss and the Jong means servant. So here the white men are the boss and the black men are the servant. He has been deceived and he grows in resolution to challenge his society based on this new truth. At the conclusion of the story, the author includes a note about Rosa Parks, whose refusal to give up her seat in Montgomery, Alabama, propelled the revered Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to the forefront of the civil rights movement in the United States. At the rally that Carly attends in this story, the words of the white lady who seems to have nothing to gain by attempting to overturn the status quo ring powerfully true with Carly. She calls the audience to challenge the racism they find, and Carly is compelled to do just this. The implication, therefore, is now Carly's actions have impacted others who witnessed his civil disobedience, who will be compelled to now also challenge the injustice in this society. Courage to Courage is easy to overlook. Carly's challenge is not forceful, and when he initially sits on the bench, he is not even noticed by the crowd. Still, he is keenly aware of the significance of his actions. If he sat on it, he was a man. If he was afraid, he denied himself membership as a human being in a human society. He is thinking in a paradoxical way that if he does not sit on the bench, he is not the part of the humanity, or he is not the human being, or he is less than a human being. And if he sits, that will be objected by the white man. Carly is deeply conflicted initially about his right to break with social prejudices of the society. Yet his mind is independent and free thinking. He realizes that he must find the courage to challenge injustice. When confronted, he does not speak. He does not move. He does not engage. Yet he is deeply courageous nonetheless. Sometimes it is easy to mistake the loudest voice as the most powerful ones. Yet in Carly, readers see the change can come through the quiet resolve of dissatisfied people as well. The bench begins with Carly, the protagonist, listening to a series of speeches on the unequivocal rights of blacks in his native South Africa. He has come from a small town and has never heard these ideas expressed before. Visiting Johannesburg, he suddenly hears ideas such as the following: society that condemns a man to an inferior position because he has the misfortune to be born black, a society that can only retain its precarious social and economic position at the expense of an enormous oppressed mass, It is up to us to challenge the right of any group who willfully and deliberately condemned a fellow group to service position. We must challenge the right of any people who see fit to segregate human beings solely on grounds of pigmentation. Carly processes these ideas. They are hard for him to believe, as he has never heard such things, but somehow they ring true. He is still contemplating these dangerous ideas when he reaches the train station. He remembers that one speaker said that each person must challenge these things in one's own way. And then he espies the bench for European only. It is the bench, it is marked, it has been written on bench for Europeans only. Suddenly, this bench represents his challenge to the rights of humanity, and Carly sees his chance to challenge the prejudice all around him. He sits. Initially, he faces an internal battle. One side of him feels compelled to move, carrying much burden as he feels the servile position he had occupied on the part of his father and his father's father, who were born black, lived like blacks, and died like mules. Yet the other part of him wins this internal struggle and he becomes determined, die like a man, in an effort to dare to overturn the societal prejudices around him. At first, no one even seems to notice him, but eventually a voice rings out, "Get off this seat." Although Carly is belittled with terms like swine, he not only refuses to move, but also he refuses to engage in a verbal battle, smoking his cigarette and remaining quiet. The speaker threatens to call the police, and still Carly does not move from a white man's bench. People gather to observe the scene, and he realizes that irresolution had now turned to determination. The police arrive, and Carly refuses to speak to them as well. One of the speakers from the rally appears and insists that Carly be spoken to with respect. The crowd turns violent, pressing in on Carly, and he is cuffed by the officers. As he leaves, Carly smiles, having challenged the system and won. As the police lead him away, commanding him to come with him, Carly speaks his first word. Certainly, he lives with the pride of one who dared sit on European bench, which was reserved for the Europeans, and on it explicitly written for Europeans only. But he had challenged and he had sat on the bench. The character sketch of Carly, the main character or protagonist of this story is a black man named Carly who lives during the era of apartheid in South Africa. He is from a rural part of the country and is enjoying a visit to Johannesburg, a big city in which the clash of ideologies regarding race is much more pronounced than it is at home. Carly's response to the idea of equality among black people and white people is somewhat ambivalent at first. On the one hand, to hear people discussing the fact that he is as good as any other man, even a white man, is empowering, and the details considering the limited opportunities for himself and for his peers as a result of segregation ring true. On the other hand, he witnesses black people and white people behaving as if there were no difference of color among them, and he marvels because such behavior would never occur in his hometown. He considers the words of a man from back home outclass, who argues that God created white and black people separately in different colors and so they should live separately. According to their color, Carly feels he should be careful before accepting new ideas. The inner conflict seems to show how deeply ingrained ideas about race can be even within members of the oppressed population. The conflict plays out further when Carly sits on the bench marked European only. He feels at first as though he has no right to sit on this bench, but then these feelings change to pride when he considers that he has done something neither his father or grandfather dared. He feels like a man. Though he endures verbal and physical attacks as a result of his rebellion, against injustice. In the end, he feels that it was his turn to smile. He had challenged and won. Who cared the rest? The racist white man. There is also the racist white man who tries to kick Carly off the bench. This man calls him black swine and a scum and he threatens Carly with the police. This leads to Carly to realize the man's weakness. He will not do anything to Carly himself, and so Carly had won the first round of the bench dispute. The police officer. When the police officer does arrive, he arrests Carly, who now feels secure in the knowledge that he should sit where he wants. He has kept his silence, and this has upset the white man and the police officer even more than his initial disobedience. Analysis of the lesson. The bench is written in third person limited perspective, allowing readers to know the intimate thoughts of Carly, a man who lives in South Africa before end of apartheid. The story undoubtedly captures some of the author's own life experience as he was born in 1931 in Cape Town and grew up in a colored or mixed race area there. Through this perspective, readers learn of the conflicting thoughts of Carly, who is hearing about the world of racial equality for the first time. Prior to this, he has believed in tradition. God made the white man and the black man separately, and the one must always be Bash and the other Jong. It is clear that even the truth can be difficult to accept when it conflicts with tradition. Carly grows in his understanding, and readers follow this transformation as he becomes resolved to challenge the system. The bench is delivered in accessible language, unencumbered by vocabulary or syntax. Even terms that are culturally specific are well explained to make the story easily transferable. The story is told simplistically, and this adds to its power. If the truth is that the basic right of humanity should be afforded to everyone, regardless of race, educational background, or creed, then it should be delivered in format to make this truth as easily accessible as possible. Dialogue is well utilized in the story so that we not only know of the intimate thoughts of Carly but also hear what Carly hears. The reader is able to process the segments of the speech that resonate with Carly in the beginning of the story and to then follow the racial slurs in all their ugliness toward the end of the story. The use of dialogue brings the scene to life as Carly faces his great challenge. The way the man's comments continue to amplify in their manner of insults are made more direct by the use of dialogue. And it also highlights through contrast another important aspect of this story, Carly's silent resolve. The author also uses symbolism though through two of the characters Carly faces. The white woman in the blue dress represents all people who fight for the oppressed when they themselves are not victims of the oppression. She is the voice who speaks out from the place of privilege to call attention to the injustice of those who suffer. Not facing oppression herself, she represents people who could choose to idly sit by and enjoy their place of societal favor, yet push for the rights of humanity instead. The man who confronts Carly on the bench represents all people who unjustly condemn others based on personal prejudice. Is used here to symbolize all those who witness the oppressed factions of society trying to escape their place of bondage and are desperate to maintain the traditions and inequality of society. Ultimately, the man has his way and Carly is removed, but the reader is left with the image of Carly's smile as he defiantly resists the ugliness and hatred which has this segment of society spews. It is up to the challenge the right of any group who willfully and deliberately condemns a fellow group to a servile position. We must challenge the right of any people who see fit to segregate human beings solely on the grounds of pigmentation. Carly, living in Johannesburg for the first time, has never heard ideas such as these in the small town where he was raised. He struggles to even believe that he could be equal in any way to white man if this means he could eat in any restaurant of his choosing or that his children could attend a white school. He considers these ideas dangerous and resolves to think them over with great seriousness. As the speakers at the rally continue, Carly notes how they behave as if there were no difference of color among them. He begins to see himself as a human being and not a colored man because of the ideas of these speakers. The last speaker was the white lady in the blue dress who asked them to challenge any discriminatory laws or measures in their own way. This becomes the basis of thought in Carly's subsequent civil disobedience. But when he hears these words, Carly really struggles with the motive behind this white woman's words. What could she possibly have to gain? And after all, she could swim anywhere she wants and is beautiful. Through her words, Carly begins to feel that he should indeed challenge the prejudices in the world around him. Yet, how in one's own way, how was one to challenge suddenly it? Yet, how in one way, how was one to challenge suddenly it dawned upon him? Here was his challenge the bench. The railway bench was Europe, written for Europeans only, neatly painted in white. For one moment, it symbolized all the misery of the plural South African society. Carly finds the representation of segregation in the bench that he is not allowed to sit in the railway station. There is nothing otherwise special about it except that it excludes his right to exist there. He reflects on the speaker who had previously called him to action and sits. As he does, he faces a fierce internal battle. There is a part of himself that believes that he is not allowed to be there. He feels the servile position he had occupied on the farm of his father. And his father's father, who were born black, lived like blacks and died like mules. Segregation has been written into his entire life experience. However, he also feels a sense of victory in this challenge and ultimately believes that he dares to challenge what his father and father's father dared not face. Get up, there are benches down there for you. Can't you hear me speaking to you, you black swine? Eventually, the challenge to his presence comes. A man spews hate and racial slurs at the Carly, who is resolute in both his commitment to remaining on the bench and to not engaging in the verbal conflict. Instead, he chooses to peacefully sit in silence. The man presses him, and his verbal insults grow in intensity. Yet Carly sat and heard nothing. Under no condition was he going to get up. The police arrive and demand him name. Still, Carly refuses to speak. It was useless to fight any longer. Now it was his turn to smile. He had challenged and won. Who cared the rest? Although he is forced to go with the police, Carly feels victory in this civil disobedience. He no longer accepts the prejudice found all over South Africa and has challenges this where he could. Just as the speaker urged him to do, he dares to make a difference in his society and clings to this as success.